Hello, everyone. Good morning. It is the final day of Iconicon. Thank you all for being with us. I'm going to take these sunglasses off now because talking to people while wearing sunglasses is rude. All right. We're talking 80s movie and television vehicles. My good friend Matt Swafford from Reklaimer's Vintage Toys is here with me.
Hello, hello.
We have, as special guest experts and enthusiasts, we have Jody from GenX ToyGeek, who runs a great YouTube channel about the vintage toy experience. Jody, how are you doing?
Greetings and salutations.
And we have the one and only accomplished comic book artist, artist, penciler of Rogue Squadron, and his own new book, Vector, John Nadeau. John, how are you, sir?
Hi, everybody. How's it going?
Good. It's good to see you. So
it's great to be here. Glad we could get the technical problems fixed.
Hey, that wasn't going to be an issue. You've been on a number of streams already, and you were just fine. So that was just a glitch.
Like a vet.
All right. So, Matt, I thought we would kick it to our guests first to kind of kick it off. What would you say is the level setting question in your mind, if you have one, to get this conversation started?
Well, fortunately, because of the topic's nature, we don't have to explain to people what vehicles are.
Right.
So that's good. I'd say, the topic overview is going to be iconic vehicles of the 80s, whether from TV, from movies, and basically just we're going to go through. We don't have a specific, bullet point list, but we're going to go through and just kind of discuss the lasting impact of some of these designs, what made them cool, what our first exposure to them was, and how they resonated with us, basically.
Yep. And for every stickler out there who's looking at this table, because you guys always do, and I appreciate it, this is representing the movie Ecto-1. All right. It's not the real Ghostbusters Ecto-1 for the purposes of this event. So pretend that Mother 1 from Bionic 6 has tricked your mind, and this is the Ecto-1. Okay, from the movie. All right. So I guess, yeah. What's up, Jody?
Bionic 2?
Yes, Bionic 2. That's right. So I guess we'll start with John. John, why do you think that the 80s was so vehicle-centric in its entertainment? What was it about the 80s that suddenly exploded with all of these iconic, gadget vehicles and high concept vehicles and true character vehicles that these shows and movies centered on?
Well, I guess there's two ways to approach that question. It's like from the point of view of the fans or the point of view of the creators. As a fan, I think we were the fans were kind of demanding the stuff that we'd seen in the movies, right? Like Mad Max and all these fast cars and Star Wars and all the cool vehicles from that. We basically demanded better of our vehicles. We wanted more faster stuff. And I think from the creators' point of view, they were giving us that, but also those guys were storytellers and kind of knew that the vehicles were basically just an extension of like pulp, right? Like you had Silver, that was his vehicle, and that even had a personality. And so the people who are creating these vehicles were basically giving us an extension of that. And as a fan, as a kid, because I was starting in the 80s, I was an 8-year-old, so you love the fast cars and the planes and the helicopters and stuff like that. That got me in my seat at 8 o'clock prime time.
Now, Jody, you grew up outside the United States, so I'm curious to find out how many of these shows made it over there. Because, admittedly, aside from James Bond and maybe one or two others, all of these shows were sort of conceived by the U.S. entertainment industry. How many of these shows, on average, did you grow up with? What are the ones you really remember?
So I think we had the majority. I definitely grew up with Blue Thunder, A-Team, Airwolf, and that's one of my favorite shows, Airwolf. That actually got me into helicopters for some reason. Always been a big fan of helicopters. We did have Knight Rider. We did have Dukes of Hazzards. I can't recollect when I saw the Ghostbusters movie, but I definitely saw the Ghostbusters cartoons. But definitely not all of the shows made it over. Definitely not.
What was it about the vehicles? Because I know you're a big Transformers collector as well, which is steeped in vehicle love. What was it about vehicles that captivated you for your whole life? I mean, you are a vehicle guy. What was it about them?
That's a very good question. Although I'm not a gearhead by far, and if a random 80s car drives by, I wouldn't even be able to name the make and model. But especially these cars from these specific shows, they're just gorgeous cars. And like I said, especially the choppers. The choppers, I don't know what it is with the choppers with Blue Thunder and Airwolf. They made me have my child. I wanted my dream job. My child dream job was always to be a helicopter pilot. Fortunately, it didn't happen, but I now have the helicopter toys to play with.
Right.
Well, that's a lot easier than flying a helicopter.
John, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I didn't want to skip over. I know we're a few minutes in, but I did want to discuss the lineage a little bit of what led into the 80s.
Sure.
I don't want to stick on the 70s for too long, but I feel like the groundwork was laid in the 70s with a few sprinklings of iconic vehicles. Starsky and Hutch's Torino, the red and white one, because I have a thing for red and white.
I see that.
And the Smokey and the Bandit Firebird, the Trans Am, even the Rockford Files. Was it a Firebird or a Camaro?
It was. I think it was a Firebird.
The gold one.
Yeah.
It was okay. It was still kind of stock and kind of boring, but
I think they wanted it understated for that show. Yeah.
Yeah. They didn't want it to be too flashy, but so there were vehicles.
The 68 Batmobile.
68 Batmobile. Even getting into the end of the 70s with movies like Phantasm and that black Barracuda.
Right.
There was and the very end of the 70s with the General Lee, which was way more of an 80s vehicle.
Right.
It's an iconic 80s vehicle, even though it came at the end of the 70s. So I feel like the groundwork was laid there. And like John said, with Mad Max and just how cool some of those vehicles were.
I'd give anything to have had a Mad Max Interceptor up here.
Yeah.
Jody, don't.
But yeah, that's what I feel like springboarded us into the 80s with some awesome, early 80s vehicles.
Yeah. And there's a running joke. I'd love to get John and Jody's take on this. There's a running joke around here at the HQ that Tim and Melinda and Aaron and I joke about all the time, that cars in the 70s for movies must have been like pennies on the dollar because of how many they were able to wreck in both movies, television shows, spectacular crashes going up through the early 80s. Fall Guy being one of them in the 80s with the truck, the signature truck. For both of you guys, I know you're both mechanically inclined, but was there also a fascination with the chases and the crashes as well? Because I freely admit I was really into the destructive chases, I admit.
Oh, definitely. I think. Okay. I think there were some TV shows where they literally had a different thing for each segment of the audience, and the cars and the crashes were what they'd kind of set aside for the 8 to 14-year-olds like me who would otherwise not care about a hard castle in McCormick. You had this old guy and this guy in his 20s, and they were talking and doing revenge stuff, and I wouldn't have been around if they hadn't been taking their McLaren and crashing it and having car chases with it.
Right.
So I was
sorry, go ahead.
A segment of their demographic.
Yeah, that show it completely falls apart if they're in a Toyota Corolla.
Jody, what about you? What did you think of was crashes and fast chases part of your fascination, or was it purely just the vehicles themselves and the mechanics?
I'm a bit ambiguous with that because crashes are always phenomenal. Like, I'm not a big F1 fan, but I love to see F1 crashes. So yeah, crashes and car chase is definitely a part of it. Then again, especially like the gorgeous cars, like when Kid Knight Rider drove into the toxic pool, that was just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Whoa, we have a very kind super chat from Eric O'Sullivan. Let me bring this up here.
Wow.
I hope I haven't.
Thank you, Eric.
There it is. Eric, thank you so much. He said, I'm 48 years old and everything you cover hits in my wheelhouse and feels. I've really enjoyed this Iconicon. Please know how deeply I respect and appreciate you. I'm blessed and have gratitude. Just got DVDs of Megaforce and Firefox.
Nice.
Thank you all. Hi, Broken Vader. He's sulking over there. His whole world's been messed up for a week. He's like a cat. And then we also have a super chat from Wolfie, who says, just cuz, got to fill in for Jody while he is on camera. And lastly, Sergeant Slaughterhouse, thank you for the super chat. He says, I didn't think the Eagle 5 would be in my top 5 iconic vehicles until Jody flashed it up on his backdrop. It really is iconic and comically genius. The Falcon is the Winnebago of the Star Wars universe. Very true.
Yeah, very true.
John, I think we missed a few super chats. Hold on real quick. I'm sorry. But hold that thought, John, because I haven't asked you yet. So just pretend you know what the question is. Chris Miwa says, just cuz and go Jody. And World Made of Cardboard says, I loved these shows. I turned my G.I. Joe Dragonfly into Airwolf, the Vamp into Kit, and the Ram into the Street Hawk, all using cardboard and poster paper. And then Wicked Person says, car and gun as part of a character's costume, an expression of that character. I think that's part of what John was referring to earlier. It's very, definitely. Yeah. So John, I'm curious, you have such a working knowledge of the mechanics and physics of these vehicles. You literally study them forensically as you draw them and everything else. Looking back as an adult now with all of the knowledge that you have of the vehicles in these films and television shows that weren't just stock cars with cool paint jobs. Like not the General Lee or the A-Team van, not taking anything away from them, but for the purposes of this question, they won't count. Which fantasy vehicles, do you think made the most sense? Or it doesn't mean that they did anything that was realistic, but maybe conceptually, kind of like how they conceive the warp drive in Star Trek, they kind of base it on pseudoscience. Which ones mechanically or even aesthetically do you think made the most logical sense to you?
I think I'd have to say the French Gazelle helicopter that was turned into Blue Thunder, because that was actually conceived of as this kind of dystopian, like fascist society overreach by the police in the original movie that became an 80s TV show for one season. And they eventually turned it into a force for good. But as ideas go, and as the reality of an idea went, I thought that one pretty much hit the mark, because they're really having ideas of like heavy weapons going on to, yep, there it is. I love it.
Yeah,
actually, I had that model when I was a kid. For some reason,
it's behind Jody right now too.
And it's beautiful and it's so menacing. And really it kind of fits in with what we've got and arguments that have been made in this last decade about overarming the police force. Yeah. I mean, if you think of it as a society thing, it was way ahead of its time.
Well, and a big part of the story in that movie is the wiretapping thing, where it's like, hey, I'm just going to pull up here completely silent and listen to people without their knowledge. And I think in 1982, when that movie came out, that wasn't as that was hard sci-fi at that point. That wasn't a reality,
right?
But it quickly became that. And
well, Jody, as a Chopper fan, as you stated, John has just said that this is the most logical vehicle to him from all of these iconic vehicles so far. What are your thoughts on Blue Thunder as a helicopter enthusiast?
As a helicopter enthusiast, I really love the design as the Blue Thunder. when looking back and researching it a bit, it's actually funny that it wouldn't really be that airborne. Even the mock-up they had, like the picture you showed earlier, it was a shell on an existing Gazelle. And as soon as they put the shell on, it became really, really hard to fly. The technology in there is amazing, though. Indeed, like with the gun in front, all the spy equipment. Yeah.
Now, since we've already brought up Blue Thunder, Matt, I want to throw this to you first. Do you like Blue Thunder more as a vehicle? Because we're not going to get into the merits of the shows or anything like that. We're talking about vehicles today, people. Do you like Blue Thunder more, or do you like Airwolf more?
Aesthetically, I like Blue Thunder more.
Okay.
Functionality-wise, I like Airwolf more.
For those of you who may not know what Airwolf looks like, we all do here on the panel, of course, and most of you probably do. Let me just bring up a picture. And I believe a lot of these pictures were pulled together by Jody and Melinda, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you, Jody and Melinda, for doing that.
As a kid, I always thought Airwolf was the most underwhelming, badass vehicle. Mm-hmm. To me, it just looked like a helicopter. It didn't have because it's very sleek. It's very, kind of a stylish, but it didn't have, it didn't have the big boisterous kind of presence
aggressive
like Blue
look.
Thunder. Yeah, Blue Thunder. I mean, it looks like a big angry bug. I mean, it's like a wasp from hell that's coming after you or something. And Airwolf just looks like. And I would see other movies where it's like they had that style of helicopter that didn't have all the armaments.
Right.
But it's like, oh, well, that's just like Airwolf.
So Airwolf looks like they're bringing Madonna in for a concert, and then they're like, fooled you, and then they're like,
it's like a rich guy is flying somewhere.
Yeah.
John, what do you think of Airwolf versus Blue Thunder?
Airwolf definitely has the kind of Bruce Wayne type thing where it could be his going to work vehicle, and then all the weapons pop out. It's under the radar if in that sense, but and it's sleek, but you definitely have to be. It wants to sneak up on you. You know what I mean? If you want to make a point, you bring Blue Thunder, but if you want to be low key in your billionairing, you bring Airwolf.
That's what I aspire to be, as a low key billionaire.
And haven't you taken that to Davos a couple of times, really?
Jody, which one? When you're comparing Blue Wolf, when you're comparing Blue Thunder and Airwolf, what do you think of the two when they're put next to one another?
Airwolf is definitely the favorite of the two. Like John said, really sleek. It had to be sleek because it does Mark 1. Deployed with turboprop thrusters. It's just such a gorgeous design chopper. I think what they did with Airwolf, taking the existing helicopters design features like the wheel pods and having them pop out guns, that's just brilliant. I just love this helicopter design. I think it's still used it was used by Dutch Coast Guard. So yeah, if you drive by the coast, I see the helicopter fly over, it's Airwolf. The theme song starts rattling in your head.
There goes my monetization right now.
Great.
That's just another reason to visit Holland, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly, because they're still operating these choppers.
I'm going to go commit some crimes in the water in Holland. I just want to ride in this thing.
What were you doing this for? I just wanted to ride in your chopper. Oh man! All right. Well, I guess while we're on the subject of vehicles that aren't cars, we should talk about Street Hawk briefly.
Street Hawk.
Yeah. Because Jody, when you first started talking about, when you first said choppers earlier, because of all the vernacular that's changed in the English language these days, I freely admit my brain kind of did a thing and I went, Jody is into chopper bikes? And then I was like, he's saying helicopters, choppers, as in the slang from the 80s. Well played, Jody. Well played. But Street Hawk, did you guys watch this? Did anybody here watch? I didn't see this show growing up.
I had a very as a kid, I never watched it.
Uh-huh.
I knew of it.
Right.
I knew of it as a concept.
Right.
Like, I knew it was a show. I knew. I think I saw like the pilot,
Mhm.
but I think when it came on, either something else that I watched was on, or it was late.
Mhm.
I don't remember, but I remember the aesthetic of this show and being like, "Oh, that's awesome, Street Hawk." And then when I would have gotten into it, it was already done
Mhm.
and canceled.
Right. Did either of you guys see Street Hawk in its original broadcast?
Nope.
I've got a vague memory of it, but not really. I mean, even seeing the photo, I'm kind of taken more back to Mad Max than I am of any real memories of that show. I'm sure I've seen all the commercials because probably no one watched network television more than me back in the 80s.
Right. Oh, wow. Jody just pulled up a really cool picture of the original Street Hawk. I assume that's the original Street Hawk, or a very, very good replica. I think that's the original from the Peterson Automotive Museum.
You are correct, sir. You are 100% correct.
Too bad this isn't a trivia challenge.
And also, if I'm not mistaken, Dreamland did an episode on Street Hawk.
Yes, Dreamland did do an episode on Street Hawk. I do think that going forward, we should set a trend of, if it's a show about a vehicle that doesn't fly, then it shouldn't have a pilot episode. It should have a driver episode.
Oh,
I know, dad joke.
ladies and gentlemen, Michael French.
So John has unwittingly determined where we're going next. John, you just mentioned Mad Max. Would you mind walking us through your interest, where the Mad Max Interceptor vehicles rank in your love of 80s movie cars?
Oh, they're right up there. In fact, I'd even put the Mad Max Interceptor above the Time Machine from Back to the Future. I mean, it's so. I mean, just the lines on it, everything about it, how they use it, how they abuse it. I mean, it's its own character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't say more good things about it. It's just so. It's probably at the apex for me.
Yeah. What did you like about its design? Like, what was it about that particular car that captivated you?
It's the lines on it are so aggressive. I mean, looking at it now, it kind of looks American, but but it's really an Australian Ford.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's what they call the 1973 Ford Falcon BX Australian.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't know that Australia makes an entire parallel universe of cars, because people think America is the big car culture country. We're not. Australians are even crazier about cars than we are, and I think that's where they came from. But it's just so aggressive, and it's almost like someone in Australia saw the muscle cars America was producing and said, "Here, hold my Barbie," and gave us the ultimate one. I think maybe the same thing with the movies. They saw the car movies we were making, kids cruising up and down, Main Street and American Graffiti and stuff like that, and said, "Oh, you want a real car movie? We'll give you a real car movie."
Absolutely. Well, I love that it's both. You talk about the lines. I love that it's both wavy, like the 70s, and it's also boxy, like the early 80s, with that front end. It's got like the front end has those lines almost like the early Camaros and the IROCs and things like that. It's got that kind of futuristic block to it, but it's also smooth and wavy. It's a beautiful melding of those two things.
I think that front end was custom. I don't think that's standard on that vehicle, especially in 1973. So
I feel like that's what they added that on to make it look futuristic, I think. Yeah, making Star Wars out of their car and anticipating an entire decade of auto design. Yeah.
Jody, what do you think? I see you have the Interceptor right behind you. What do you think of the Mad Max Interceptor?
Well, as John said, it has a certain aggressiveness, but he forgets to call out the main aggressive feature, that turbo engine that sits on top of the hood. And when he turns that on, man. Yeah, it's a gorgeous car. It's a gorgeous car. And like John said, it's so aggressive. But for me, the main thing that popped out is that turbo engine on the hood. really. Well, it's not a DeLorean though.
Well, I was thinking about that when John was talking about how much he loved the Interceptor. I have the same dilemma, John. As much as I love the DeLorean time machine, my favorite car is actually Bond's Living Daylights Aston Martin. That's my favorite car of the 80s. And sometimes I feel like so many of us in this retro community and who grew up in the 80s, we love the DeLorean like we love the girl or boy next door. But we also have that one car that's like out of our reach or just so cool that, it just blows our minds. And for me, it's the Aston. For you, it sounds like it's the Mad Max Interceptor.
Mm-hmm. Actually, you know what? A few years ago, there was a documentary that came out, and I haven't seen it, but I'm fascinated to do so. It was about Eric Bana and his Ford Falcon DX Australian and his love of it. And I'm dying to see this, but apparently he owns one of these, so he's living the dream for all of us.
Really? Yeah. I think it's amazing that even movie stars who have accomplished a lot in their field are still intrinsically like us when it comes to their interests. They get upset. Like who is it? Rick Springfield has a huge vintage Star Wars collection, and it's amazing.
Well, like Jay Leno has 1 million vehicles,
right,
and motorcycles and stuff like that.
Right. Let's see. So we've got a few super chats here. Master Son 42. Thank you for the super chat. He says, "Good morning. How is Jody on the panel and answering in the chat? Multi-talented panel this morning." And Michael, aka the Bionic 6 Basher, LOL. And then
that must be Master Son.
Let's say what?
That must be Master Son.
It's Master Son. Yeah. And then Colmick 2067. Thank you for the super chat. He says, "Highwayman truck that turned into a helicopter was an awesome vehicle. We have that in the deck, thanks to Jody and Melinda. We're going to get to that." And then Jeff Barker, thank you for the super chat. He says, "The flying bikes from Battlestar Galactica in 1980 kick Street Hawk's butt, but I want them both." All right, well,
fair enough.
Fair. And then Wolfie for $5. Thank you so much. He says, "The Imperial speeder bike, way better than those flying bikes from Galactica 1980. Oof." So it looks like there's some rivalry going on in the chat right now for the different vehicles.
We did kind of opt, just to let everybody viewing and in the chat know, we kind of veered away from spaceships in this. That's kind of its own panel. We do appreciate the comments, but we didn't want to get into X-Wings and Millennium Falcon and the gazillion spaceships that were in the 80s and 80s movies and TV. So we did kind of keep it to actual vehicles.
Right.
So just so everybody knows.
Yeah. And John, you had a thought?
Well, I wonder where the flying motorcycles from Megaforce would fit in there. Those are certainly vehicles, but do they have a pilot or a driver?
Oh yeah, good point. Well, that's like as I joked in the Bionic 6 vehicle, they've all got tires, but they all fly. So yeah, in a realistic sense, in a live action sense, it's the same dilemma. It's like, are you a pilot or are you a driver? I guess you better be both if you're going to drive something like that. All right, so let's look at, you know what? Let's let our guests decide where we go next. Where would you like to go next?
Be the pilot or driver.
Well, going back to Mad Max.
Oh, okay, we're going back. All right.
No, where are you? There you are. Gotta love technology. So, although the Interceptor was a great vehicle, I do also like this one.
Oh,
the Airlight, yeah.
Yeah, from Road Warrior, Mad Max 2.
Yep.
Yeah.
The gyro.
So, Jody, what am I sensing here? That you like vehicles that make it look like you're not coming back from that trip? I mean, I know that they actually are, when they're maintained, they do fly and all that kind of stuff. I've been in an ultralight, which is not like this, but what is it about that vehicle that fascinates you?
It's just a fun thing. Gyrocopters, like I said, I'm a big helicopter fan. Gyrocopters are a different series or a different breed at all, completely. It's a fun design, the gyrocopters. I'm not that big a fan of this one, but it did make a really fun addition to the Mad Max 2 movie.
Yeah.
It definitely
To
had
the
the feel
pilot.
of something you could build in your garage and surprise your neighbors by rolling it out and taking off in it.
Well, I like there's an aesthetic to that vehicle in that movie too, where I always drew the correlation where it's post-apocalyptic. Just humanity in general and technology is so strung thin that they take flying down to its most basic elements. It's a chair, a stick, and a prop.
Yep.
And it's a guy. I mean, that's as close as you can get to just flying.
Jody, pull
without
that
a machine.
Sorry, Jody, pull that image up again while you're talking, so everybody can. I'm gonna make that image bigger of that copter.
And I love that it was like this is all we have left of flying vehicles. It's kind of like a statement in the movie where all we have left is our desire to move around with them hunting down gasoline and water and food. And just the most basic forms of transportation, basically. I always thought that was cool.
Thanks for doing that, Jody. I appreciate that. Sorry, John, go ahead.
Well, also it has no armor, so if you think about it, when that guy is flying into battle against all those bad guys, that takes a lot of guts to do that because he has absolutely no protection. He's basically going to battle, like Matt said, in a deck chair. So.
He's got a snake.
Looking back,
he snake bombs them. That's it.
You fight with what you've got. But
he brought a snake to a gunfight.
As realistic helicopters go, I would say that's maybe the most realistic of them all.
Yeah, for sure. All right, John, take us to the next place. Where do you want to go? What do you want to talk about?
I don't know. I would maybe go back to the beginning of the decade and say that Thomas Magnum really rocked a lot of. There you go. Him in that 308.
What did you? So there in the 80s there was this rivalry with kids between the Ferrari and the Lamborghini Countach. What camp were you in?
Well, I had first seen the Countach in what was they had the girls driving the black one,
Cannonball Run,
and it had the more aggressive lines. I mean, if the Countach looked more like the Interceptor, whereas the red Ferrari looked like something your parents want you to touch because they don't want you to scratch it. But at the same time, the Ferrari, you got that every week. So yeah, that was why a kid like me would tune into Magnum P.I.
Now I know that Matt is a huge Magnum fan. What was it about that show, the vehicle? See, I almost fell into it. What was it about that vehicle that you really liked and still do?
It was kind of, I mean, he had sidekicks in that show, but that was almost like his horse, like the cowboy and his horse.
Like John was saying about Silver and the Lone Ranger.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It was almost, that was his steed. And not only that it was cool looking and that it's fast, but even in the opening of that show, I mean, he drives that car and he drives it, he drives it like it's an extension of himself. And it's just, it was so, I've used this word a lot this week during Iconicon, but it was very tactile. Like it felt like the kind of car that was exotic, but it was familiar.
Right.
If that makes sense, with the tan leather interior and like just it felt, and it was always open with that Targa, with the Targa, and he had to pull the seat out because he was too tall. Yeah, and he's 6'4" or 6'5" or however tall he is. So it's him riding in that thing. It was like it wasn't comfortable.
Right.
When you see him in that, I mean, he's he looks like Mr. Incredible in the driving to work. But
I didn't know that about that part of the show. Was he actually doing a Bubba Smith?
He was.
Yeah, they ripped this. They unbolted the seat, and they gave him a little pad, and they had him sit on the floorboard of the car and just kind of mocked up the back of the seat behind him if that was even necessary. That's why the car only has the top on in like one episode when it's raining one day. But most of the time, Tom Selleck's head is way above the top of the car. Yeah.
But it was such a cool aspect. I don't want to move on too fast because that helicopter though that TC flies is, I mean, the helicopter itself is cool. It's a great design, but that color scheme, I mean,
you don't like Reese's Pieces?
No, I love it. That's what I'm saying. It's iconic. It's a beautiful helicopter. Very just daring looking.
Yeah, it's the color you paint your helicopter if you expect to crash in the Hawaiian jungle and need to be spotted by other helicopters, I think.
Well, you know what? I will take that logic because that's been eye-opening for me. See, this is why John does what he does and I do what I do.
Well, also, I'd point out as far as driving the Ferrari, remember, it wasn't Magnum's Ferrari. It was Robin Masters' Ferrari and or arguably Higgins' Ferrari. And I think he drove it like he didn't care if he'd bang it up.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a perk of his job.
He drove it like he stole it, and he often did. Yeah. Jody, did you watch this show growing up?
Yep. I watched it a couple of times. Loved the detective part of it because I do love detectives. I didn't have that much with the Ferrari though. Like Matt, the little Volkov helicopter did more for me.
Oh, you and those helicopters. I'm going to remember this. I'm going to remember it. Well,
that being said, question for you. Because going back to that little Volkov, is that probably the most used chopper in all these TV shows? Because you see that model all over the place, especially converted like as gunships.
Mm-hmm. I would say it is. I mean, I've seen it so often in both Airwolf and other shows where they had to have rival choppers. I think they were even in MacGyver a few times.
A-Team.
Mm-hmm. The guy at the end of Blue Thunder that fights Blue Thunder uses one of those.
Right.
McDowell, yeah.
Yeah, I think because they were so maneuverable, more so than some of the bigger choppers.
Right.
I think it lended itself to like that dynamic kind of action and stunts and things like that. Mm-hmm. You could do cool stuff.
Remember that Magnum and TC and his whole crew, they were all Vietnam vets, and that chopper was the go-to U.S. Army spotter chopper in Vietnam. So those were like ubiquitous all over there. I wouldn't be surprised if that was like Army surplus stuff. And of course, Donald Belisario, who was the showrunner for Magnum, would have known all about what they flew in Vietnam and had his Vietnam vet people be really familiar with that stuff.
That's a good connection. That's a good point.
Matt, would you say that I'm having problems with my English this morning, all right? And it's the only language I speak, so that's really bad. But it's because I'm so tired. Would you say that the Magnum P.I. LJN toy of the Ferrari is the most valuable 80s vehicle toy out there? Or is there another one that I'm not thinking of? The one that Jody has pictured, I'm going to make his image bigger again, right there in the corner. Would you say that's the most valuable vintage toy vehicle representation of these famous vehicles, or is there another one?
I'd say if it's not the...
Sorry.
No. If it's not the most valuable, it's in the top 3.
Okay.
Because I've never even seen one, and I deal in vintage toys. I've only seen pictures, and I know when you come across them, they're usually not loose. They're usually still men in the box because they are pretty fragile,
right?
And they weren't sold heavily back in the day, so that's why they're so rare. But there are some other rare vehicles, but I don't think anything compares to that.
Jody, I'll tell you right now, I have the A-Team van right here, and
the Corvette, the Corvette is also
the Corvette. Yeah, you're right. The Corvette is pretty rare.
That's another hard one to find in good shape.
Yeah, good point, Jody. Great point.
Did the Thomas Magnum action figure fit into the 308 toy?
It did.
Yeah, because that toy looks really the vehicle itself looks kind of janky. Like it's oversized and it only sort of resembles a 308 if you squint and then spray pepper spray in your eyes. Like it's not quite up to snuff. I mean, it looks the part for a kid, but
it looks more like a Mazda Miata.
Say what? What's that, John?
It looks like Ken could have also fit into that going to pick up Barbie.
All right, Matt, you get to choose the next car we go to.
Ooh, well, since we've already mentioned the A-Team, let's go and talk about that A-Team van.
Okay.
The Vandura.
We will quickly read the super chat from Grindhead. Thank you. He says, Jody, you flippin' beauty. I thought I was the only person who remembered the Highwayman. Yes. Also, red and gray beards unite. So, and then let me just check for any more super chats, and then we will move on to the A-Team van. I do not see any, so we're going to move on. All right, so the famous A-Team van, B.A. Baracus's ride of choice.
That is a GMC Vandura.
Mm-hmm. And what was it about this vehicle that you loved so much?
I loved that it was an attainable vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when I was a kid, I couldn't have a talking car. Like, I couldn't have Knight Rider, and I realized that was sci-fi. That was wild. But the A-Team rode around in a van that just had a really cool paint job.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was a kid, I was always like, oh yeah, I'm going to drive the A-Team van when I get older. Obviously I don't do that now, but it's simple, but it's just awesome looking. The color scheme on it, and talk about in a show just wearing out a vehicle. I mean, they drive that thing in that show.
Right. What do you guys think of the A-Team van, or did think? I mean, where does it rate for you guys?
It's up there.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying, you don't mind the fact that it's a van. Like, you're cool with that.
Oh, remember in the late 70s, like when I was a little kid, my friends had older brothers who would have these great vans. The late 70s was like the era of the tricked out, like shaggin' wagon, where you'd roll up. If you rolled up to high school in one of these things, you were the king of that high school. And this is basically an extension of that. So a van, today we think of a van as, kind of this dumpy thing to transport, lumber around in. But back in the late 70s, early 80s, it was this great thing. It was like a little bachelor pad on wheels, basically.
Before the minivan came along and killed it in the mid 80s.
Oh, I'm just simply enjoying the fact that everybody's so open-minded about the van as a concept, because it's just a GMC Vandura with a nice paint job and a spoiler on it in essence. But I like the fact that, because when we were kids, like, we liked the A-Team van and we wanted it for our action figures, but it wouldn't be the first thing we would run out and buy if we had all the money in the world for a vehicle. Whereas now I see a lot of guys in our generation going and retrieving these GMC Vanduras and painting them up and restoring them to look like the A-Team van. That's like their dream attainable vehicle.
Yep. And as far as cosplaying with a vehicle, it's a relatively cheap one to do that with, because you can still find Vanduras for, 10 grand, 15 grand.
And if you go to a convention, it can actually haul all of your luggage.
Yes.
Whereas I can tell you the DeLorean cannot. Real quick, I just want to hit 2 super chats. Salvador, thank you for the super chat. He said, Matt likes Magnum. I'm a Ben and Jerry's guy myself, but to each their own. I like these vehicles because there's a chance of actually owning one. And then we have one more here from Wicked Person.
I love a good ice cream pun, Sal.
Wicked Person says, Magnum and TC had been in Nam, so Hawaiian shirts and the stripy helicopter are civvies for them after all the olive green. And then I don't think we have any more. So I'm sorry. So let's get back to the A-Team van. Jody, what are your thoughts on the A-Team's Vandura?
It's a sports van, so it's nice that BA pimped it up with the rims and the heightened suspension on the back, but it's a van.
Yeah,
it's not a helicopter, is what you're saying.
Well, the only thing that I think is kind of silly in retrospect, and I didn't think of at the time because you're just dazzled by how cool it looks, but if these guys are trying to hide, it's a very inconspicuous vehicle. It's a very conspicuous vehicle. Sorry.
Yeah.
You could see that thing from anywhere in the air.
And like, yet, because it's a van, it might actually get away with it because.
Yeah, I mean, it's got the fin on the back, the big spoiler.
I'm just saying that they hide in
for that extra aerodynamic advantage.
I guess what I'm saying is they hide in plain sight a lot better than most of the Transformers in 1984.
This is true.
Okay. All right. Let's see. We've gone round. Jody, take us to the next car, sir, or vehicle.
Take us to the next car.
Or vehicle.
Well, or vehicle. Well, we can go back to Highwayman because
Okay.
it was definitely one of the most useful car, or most cars with the most features, probably. Well, if you don't call all the techs in the Bond vehicles, but yeah, it's the one with the most features. It's not one vehicle; it's 3 vehicles. It's a truck, it's a chopper, and it's a sports car.
Yes.
Okay, see, it's got a chopper in it, therefore it wins for GenX ToyGeek. But that's great. The chopper, if I recall, did it actually work in the show? Was it an actual chopper that they had put on top of this, or was it I can't remember if it was like a special effect or something.
No, so the truck itself does have an actual Gazelle cab or cockpit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the truck itself, it's not a functional Gazelle in there.
Okay. So
Looks
they
like
did
had a
took it off of
transformation
Airwolf
scene.
one and gave it to this.
Yeah. So they did some camera trickery and switched to an actual Gazelle. Okay.
They do have a transformation scene where it it's like they used it, I'm sure, once.
Mhm.
They shot it once and then they reused it, but it's like where the helicopter like deploys and comes out. But it doesn't actually do all that.
Right.
That's movie trickery.
John, did you ever see this show when it came out?
I don't think I did, except if I'm remembering correctly, they did the TV movie version of this on Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm thinking of the right one.
I don't recall that.
I think Melinda watched it. I recall her watching it and then trying to find the Highwayman show so that we would have it for the presentation.
But it definitely was under if I'm thinking correctly, then it was definitely under a different name, where you got the guy, he's transporting some plutonium or something in the back of his tricked out 18-wheeler.
Yeah, that sounds correct, John. I distinctly recall either it being a Mystery Science Theater or a riff tracks involving the Highwayman show. For sure.
It was a short-lived show. I know Sam Jones that played Flash Gordon was the lead, and his sidekick or his friend in that was Jocko, the Australian guy that did the Energizer battery commercials, where he's like, "Oi!"
Right.
And he's like, big, and he's always wearing spandex, and he's like, "Oi, oi, oi, oi!" And he had like the flat top. Yeah, he was hot. He was famous for like a month back in 1987.
Because this show only had 7 episodes or something.
It was short. It was like maybe 8 episodes, or I feel like they canceled it before they finished that first season.
Jody, how did you see it? Did you see it at the time, or did you see it in online or something?
No, on television when I was a kid.
Wow!
But like Matt says, it's really, really short-lived, and I can't recollect any reruns. I don't know even if it's available on modern day media, on Blu-ray or something. It's
I haven't seen it since then. Yeah. I saw it when I was a kid, and I haven't seen it in 35 years.
Wow.
The truck still exists, though.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. Where is it right now?
It's currently owned by a tattoo shop in Sulphur Springs, Texas.
All right.
With the transformations and stuff like that, I wonder if the people who came up with that hadn't been a little bit influenced by Gotcha Man.
Oh, good point, John. Great point.
I actually think that's a Belisario, if I'm not mistaken, John. I think that's one of his shows. Yeah, it has that feel. I could be wrong, but it's either him or Stephen J. Cannell.
James Salzberg.
Cannell was everywhere.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was throwing that typewriter paper all over the place. Tony, James, thank you for the super chat. He says Tony from Analog loves Highwayman. Nice. And let's see. I think there's another super chat here from Scuba Pete. Scuba Pete, I wanted Marty McFly's pickup truck so bad. Jody and I believe it was Jody. Was it you and I, Joe? No, it was Keith Holmesley. Keith and I were having a conversation right before Iconicon about Marty's truck, and
the most overshadowed vehicle in history.
Yes, amazing vehicle. Just it's a stock, well, not stock, but it's not a fantastic car. It's a road vehicle,
it's a Toyota SR5,
but it looks great. And he was debating with me the continuity differences between Part 1 as they had it decoed in Part 3. And I guess in Part 3 they had covers on the fog lights and did a number of other things.
They switched it up.
I guess it's hard in Back to the Future to be any other vehicle than the DeLorean and get noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like having a sibling that's a super genius and a model and a sports hero, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm Dave. I'm the other brother.
Dave March has a super chat. He says the entire series of the Highwayman can be found on YouTube. I watched the show when it came out. Nice.
Is it good quality? I wonder.
I imagine it's got to still be broadcast.
Or is
quality.
it like VHS rips?
Jody's saying it's not. It's not great. John, this is a great opportunity to go into Back to the Future. You had mentioned earlier the DeLorean time machine. Now we've had Scuba Pete talk about the pickup truck. As somebody who draws vehicles with the level of detail like the DeLorean, what was your take on this when you first saw it, and whatever your thought was just now?
Well, I was about to say about the pickup. It occurs to me that the Toyota pickup being the teenager's dream vehicle seems like that was the turning point for that, because in the early 80s, and like I was talking about earlier, the 70s, the dream vehicle used to be the van. Mm-hmm. But Back to the Future kind of changed all that, the same way that JFK not wearing a hat killed the hat industry in the early 60s. I mean, right. It was one movie that was this great big influence on culture, because I saw Back to the Future. I was 14 and I wanted a pickup truck. I'd never wanted a pickup truck before. They were like redneck vehicles, but somehow Marty McFly made it more valley.
That's one of the first like sporty pickup trucks I ever remember seeing.
Yes. Check out that 4x4. That is hot. So I'll admit this. Confession time. If I had to do it all over again in 2009, in knowing what I know now, instead of buying the DeLorean, I may have actually just gone and gotten the Marty pickup truck. Knowing what I know now.
It'd be a daily driver.
It would be a daily driver, and I wouldn't have any of the drama around it like everybody does who owns a DeLorean. I would, Now, John, what are your thoughts on the DeLorean time machine design and its role in the film? Is it deserving of all of its pop culture accolades, or is it, maybe overblown or overexposed?
I think it's a great example of a movie taking what is really a mediocre kind of underpowered car and making it iconic, and making all the kind of psychological feeling that comes with it, the driver of it. But at the same time, it's incredibly well designed visually. I mean, with the doors and with just the clean lines and the sleekness of it. It looks like something Sid Mead made.
Yeah,
it's a gorgeous car. It's a. I think people when they like the DeLorean and why they can latch onto that one, it's not just the movie; it's what that car represents. I feel like there's like this. It's a beacon of this. You can go anywhere and do anything.
Right.
You can go back in time and change things. You can fix mistakes, and so not only is it visually arresting and just awesome looking, but there's a spirit in that car that I feel like, and the fact that it's not painted and that they all look the same, and it's just that kind of bare minimum shine. Like there's something kind of mystical about that car.
Yeah. Jody,
also,
sorry, John, go ahead.
Well, there's this, in a sense, it's the Tucker car, but a little bit more successful. It's one guy. It's not Ford or Chevy or GM or Plymouth. It's an indie car company, right. And that guy, while the company didn't go on, he did manage to put something out in the pop culture, like Tucker did with his cars in the 40s, that has the test of time.
Yeah.
Now, Jody, what are your thoughts on the Back to the Future DeLorean time machine?
It's definitely one of the most iconic vehicles of the 80s for me, especially with the gullwing doors, the stainless steel look and feel, the overall look and feel of the car. It looks futuristic, yet fits the era. It's just a gorgeous car. I've been lucky to sit in Michael's DeLorean for a few minutes. So it's just a gorgeous car. What also is noticeable that it's actually being reused for multiple shows as the base for different cars. So the Gadget Mobile is based on the DeLorean. The Star Car in the last Starfighter is based on the DeLorean. And they even use a DeLorean for season 2 and 3 in Hardcastle and McCormick.
That's right, when they redesigned the vehicle because one of the co-stars had a hard time getting in the actual Coyote, if I recall.
Well, didn't they use the DeLorean in a mask vehicle?
Yes, in a mask ad, in the first mask commercial, they used the DeLorean at the end.
Yeah, so they thought, Kenner thought so much of the designs of that car that instead of doing a mock-up of the toys, and saying like, look, here's this cool futuristic toy car that we make. It's like, oh yeah, here's just a DeLorean. That works.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So yeah, I always felt that was funny.
I mean, look, I can't sit here and be like, oh yeah, the DeLorean's cool, but it's not that big a deal. I mean, look at me. Yeah, the DeLorean is definitely my second favorite car of all time, and my first love. It's what brought me into really loving vehicles. I did grow up with Knight Rider and Dukes of Hazzard before that, and even Ghostbusters by a small margin. But the DeLorean for me was the one where it was just, whoa, and I couldn't get that car out of my head. That was the first car that just I could not stop thinking about. So, and it wasn't because it was a time machine. It was only Back to the Future introducing me to it. And then suddenly I had an appreciation for the car itself when I found out it was a real car. So it is my first great automotive love. We have some super chats here real quick. Simon Garner Photography says, what did you guys think of the vehicles from Automan that were created by Cursor? We had a Lamborghini Countach LP400, a helicopter, etc. What do you guys think of the vehicles from Automan, gentlemen?
I don't. My easy answer is I don't. I've never seen that show. I know of it. I've seen the opening of it on different things. I had no exposure to it. That show didn't have any effect on me whatsoever. I think it's kind of neat. They look futuristic, with the glow in the dark piping on them and everything. If I had to draw you a picture of it right now, I'd have no idea. I would just kind of do a wedge with wheels and
What did you think of it, John? Do you remember the Automan vehicle? I'll pull up a photo here, courtesy of Jody.
I'd have to say that one doesn't ring a bell, but nice. I'm guessing that's in the post-Tron era, a little bit. But
that's got kind of a Sid Mead feel to it too, doesn't it, John?
Yeah. But I'll take a Lamborghini Countach every day. I'd watch it.
It's like a Sid Mead Countach.
What do you think, Jody?
I haven't seen the show. The only time I've ever heard of it was during one of your DragonCon panels. It is, however, curious that they, as it's based on the Countach, we haven't seen the Countach much in these 80s series or 80s shows. It's also a really iconic car, the Countach, but probably too expensive.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They talk about a car from the 80s that increased in price. You can't find one of those. I feel like in the early 90s, maybe mid 90s, you could still feasibly afford one of those, even though they were still expensive. Now, I mean, those things go for, more than they did when they were new.
And I think that's going to be a perfect transition to the next vehicle we talk about. But before we do that, Chris G with the super chat says, what about Delta Force vehicles, the 6-wheel transport thing, dune buggies and motorbikes with rockets? What do you think about that, Matt, as a Canon Films fan?
6-wheel. Okay. I think you might be combining two things, because when I think of 6-wheel vehicle, I think of the command vehicle from Megaforce, not Delta Force, but, which was a really cool, made for that movie type vehicle. It was neat looking. I thought that was one of the coolest. Like I used to draw stuff like that when I was a kid. Like I would doodle that vehicle. The vehicles in Delta Force with Chuck Norris, they had the dirt bikes that had the mortars on the back and the rockets on the front and the little machine guns on the handlebars. And then they had the fast assault desert vehicle that looked almost like an Awe Striker.
Right.
I don't remember anything else in Delta Force though.
And John, you seem to have a comment on this too.
Yeah. I feel like he might be referring to Megaforce. If that's I know more about Megaforce than Delta Force. It's probably been 30 years since I've seen the Chuck Norris movie, but as a kid, I know. As a kid, I really liked Megaforce. Obviously, you had your flying motorcycles and dune buggies. So did that ever spawn a line of toys?
They made Hot Wheels of the dune buggy. They made a black one, and then they made the white and designed one. And they made the command vehicle too. That's a hard one to find, but they're just Hot Wheels, normal Hot Wheel size. They also made the white and red. Once again, my thing.
I see that.
The white and red Ford Bronco civilian vehicle that they drove around is also a Hot Wheel. Oddly enough, if you want to, back in 1982, if you wanted to play with that instead of the dune buggy, which I don't know who would.
And we have a comment here as it just jumps on me because that's what YouTube does.
That's what live streams do.
We have a comment here from Wolfie who says, Bigfoot, before I got my Ecto 1, I was obsessed with monster trucks. I'm sure it started in the 70s, but seemed to be everywhere in the 80s. Great chat. I forgot to put Bigfoot up here.
Yeah, we've got Bigfoot. He's right there.
That's a failing on my part,
as far as monster trucks go, Bigfoot was the Michael Jordan of monster trucks.
That is true.
And I don't know why.
Because take this job and shove it.
That's why.
That's right. You're right, John. Take this job and shove it.
Underrated movie, by the way. But it wasn't for athletic ability by any means. It wasn't any better than any of those other trucks.
Jim Largo would like to ask all of us, if you guys were making a time machine that needs to go 88 miles per hour, what 80s car would you choose?
Not a DeLorean.
John, we'll start with you.
Maybe a Ferrari or a Lambo. They could, if I needed to go back in time very quickly, I'd want my 0 to 88 speed be sub 1 minute. In fact, in about 10 seconds, maybe less. And I think an 80s Ferrari or a Countach would probably do the trick.
As long as you're going back to another time with paved roads, I think you're good. Yeah, for sure. Jody, what about you?
The Corvette C3. But then again, I would need to jump to a time where all the roads are straight and don't have curves.
Sorry about that. It's funny because it's true. All right, and then let's just check from. We have one more super chat here from Pete. Thank you for the super chat. He says the design of the DeLorean was created by Giorgetto Giugiaro. I've never been able to pronounce that because I'm not Italian and I'm an uncultured swine. But I respect the man immensely. He came up with the designs for cars like Aston Martins and Ferraris. Yes, and so he designed it, and then it basically got bolted onto a Lotus Esprit frame at the last minute.
Yes. Thank you for your contribution, Giorgetto.
Yeah. Thank you for the super chat, Manta. Appreciate that. Crap. But here it is. He says, what about the Dodge Chrysler car from the movie Wraith?
Yes. I didn't get to answer the time machine car.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It would be the Wraith car. The Turbo Interceptor.
I didn't mean to talk. I didn't mean to.
Okay. It's okay. I forgive you.
See, I see these gentlemen as special guests.
I knew it would come up. So.
And you're sitting right next to me.
I'm the not special guest.
No, it's not that. It's just you're kind of like I start thinking that I'm sitting next to a stop sign, and so I forget. I'm kidding. No,
Andrew Richter.
So yeah, you would choose the Wraith as the substitute for the DeLorean time machine.
The Dodge Turbo Interceptor. Yep.
So then this all worked out.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a segue.
All right. All right.
So
Oh, wow. So Robo P has a super chat. He says, any Transformers from the 80s jump out between the real cars of the first 2 season Autobots or the movie and beyond futuristic cars. Hot Rod is an awesome design. Track is another stylish car. Optimus is iconic more than Rodimus Prime. All right, Jody, you're going to take this one before anybody else. So what is your take on Robo P's question?
For me, it's Track's the Corvette C3. Definitely, that's my favorite one. That's somehow although the character Trax is very, very vain, just the car, it's such a gorgeous car. That's the one that stands out to me. The Nissan Fairlady stands out a bit, especially because it was one of my first Transformers, probably.
Okay.
And and I know we specifically didn't want to get into toys in this panel, but I mean, that first G1 run, the art crew of Transformers, I feel like every one of those cars became iconic.
Yes.
And that was one of the biggest reasons for that line's success was that, you would put a Lancia Stratos in a kid's hand and it's like, wow, I don't know what this car is, but it looks awesome.
Right.
And a Nissan Fairlady and even the vans that were Ironhide and Ratchet. I was always like, these are cool little vans. Like, I've never seen one of these, but
right.
It looks cool.
We have a sorry, Jody, were you about to say something?
Nope.
Oh, okay. We have a comment here from Pete. Thank you for this very kind super chat. He says, before the DeLorean was invented, John Z. DeLorean was the head of the Pontiac division at General Motors in the 60s and 70s. He is responsible for what many call the first modern muscle car, 1964
GTO.
Pontiac GTO. That is absolutely true. It's a shame that he couldn't realize his vision for the DMC-12. All right. So we're up to date on our super chats, I believe. Let me just pull this one down real quick because I forgot to do that. And we're going to go to, you were talking about cars that were too expensive, John, like the Lamborghini for Automan, why we didn't see them more often. There was one car that was so expensive it wasn't even the real thing, and that was the Miami Vice Daytona. Iconic vehicle that they couldn't even afford, so they kitted one up, which ticked off the Ferrari Motor Company, and they had to get rid of it, and Ferrari said, you can have this specially painted white Testarossa.
Don't use this kit car of our design. We'll give you a Ferrari to use.
Right. Which
take your pick.
I don't know if that shows massive amounts of pride in their company or if it shows massive amounts of hubris. I'm not really sure.
I think it was a little bit of both, but I think it was more of a, if you're going to promote our brand, use the best thing we got. And at that time, the Testarossa was,
What's that, John?
Face the product, use the best thing.
Yeah.
And I'll give them this. They got rid of the first one in spectacular fashion. I remember as a kid, loving that car, but like, when they kill off a character in a TV show and you're really sad about that. Oh no, someone died. When they aimed a Stinger missile at their Ferrari and blew it up, it was a death in the family for me.
Yeah. I'm dying to hear what Jody thinks of this show because he and I have a like mind for certain things. But I just want to say I didn't actually watch a lot of this show growing up. I think I was slightly too young. But the one clip that I did catch in broadcast, and it stuck in my brain forever, was I flipped the channels and that was the scene I saw, was them blowing up his car.
Yep.
And that's the one moment that I ever saw from Miami Vice in the 80s. Jody, what did you think of Miami Vice? Did you watch it when it was out, or was it something you learned about later?
I've never seen the show. Never. I heard about it, but never seen it. But that clip you mentioned, that's probably the most rewatched clip, at least for me. It's the most rewatched clip of your Dragon Con presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It was a joy for me to put that together because I was like, I can't wait for the audience to see this clip. It was not because the cars weren't cool. I loved the cars in the show. It's just show was not for, it was above a 7-year-old's head or 6-year-old, however old I was.
It was cops and robbers, but it was very involved.
Yes.
And there was a lot of grown-up stuff going in it that kids just I mean, it was stylistically, kids were like Miami Vice, yeah, but we didn't really get what was going on. Like
Right.
I said, it was,
Yeah.
you know.
Jody, take us to the next car.
Take us to the next car. Let's see. Yeah, we can do the flying RV.
Okay. From Spaceballs?
I'm picking up the outline of a Winnebago.
Winnebago.
John, what did you think of this movie if and when you saw it in the 80s? I saw it in the theater as a kid. I was laughing my butt off. What did you think?
Me too. I thought the Winnebago thing was clever. This was what, like 87 or 88, something like that. And yeah, my teenage mind kind of thought this was hilarious. I wasn't really evaluating the RV with the benefit of hindsight, but looking back, it's clear they were kind of wanting to do the Millennium Falcon, and that makes us rethink the Millennium Falcon a little bit. I mean, if you had to think, if the Millennium Falcon was an 80s car, it might be a Winnebago, and that's probably the discussion they had in coming up with a vehicle for this movie.
Well, I feel like in Star Wars, when they see the Millennium Falcon for the first time, and Luke's like, "What a piece of junk!" And as viewers and especially as kids, we were like, "It's not a piece of junk. That thing looks awesome." So it never really resonates that it's basically like a Winnebago in space. Mm-hmm. And so when Spaceballs came out, it was like, "Oh, I get it now. It's like a Winnebago with a rocket engine in the back," and that's the charm of it, is that it's big and ugly and it doesn't look like much. And, you know, it was the fastest hunk of junk in the galaxy.
Right. And not to beat the science fiction drum too much, but I mean, to contextualize, you know, Luke seeing that, imagine you're hiring a guy to be the Cannonball Run vehicle. And he says, "I've got the greatest Cannonball Run vehicle for you. And we're going to smuggle while we're doing it. And we're going to go fastest across the country," and then they show you a Winnebago. That's probably what Luke was thinking.
Real quick, I did not skip your super chat. I had it here in escrow in the background of the monetization. I was about to catch it. So, but he says, "I don't like choppers, but if TC was flying one, I'd get in. Thanks for doing Iconicon." And you're very welcome. But we keep a running record back here, just like on Midnight's Edge, of all the super chats. So I always check it every few minutes. And then RoboP says, "Oh no, wait, we already did RoboP." So yep. Cool. All right, sorry about that, John. Which car are we even talking about?
We were still on the Eagle 5, the Winnebago.
Oh, the Winnebago. Jody, tell us about your impressions of the Eagle 5.
It's just such a fun movie, and that they chose a freaking RV as a spaceship. It's just hilarious. That's all I can say about it. It's just freaking hilarious.
So what you're saying is you own this movie on 4K, is what you're saying?
No, I don't have a Blu-ray player.
Wow. Okay. Well, I actually own this on 4K. We screened it the other day, Tim and I, while we were cleaning up the studio. Looks great. Highly recommended.
I loved Spaceballs when it came out. I had the novelization that I read before I saw the movie, and I've loved that movie for decades. I watched it about a year or two ago, and I think I'm done with it. Like I think I'm never going to watch that movie again. A lot of the jokes don't hold up.
Yeah,
they're very
on the nose.
They're super on the nose. A lot of them are very dated, and a lot of them are very sophomoric. And just kind of toddlery. It's it's still funny, but it's like, okay, well, I've absorbed all that funny. I got to move on.
Right.
So.
Now I'm kind of fascinated to see how all of those jokes translate into a novel. I'm going to comb the desert.
It's interesting, yeah.
Spaceballs, the novel.
I remember reading Prince Valium and laughing just uncontrollably. And that was the funniest thing in that book when I was, 10 years old.
Right.
I don't know why.
Where are you taking us next, Matt?
We haven't really talked about Knight Rider.
We haven't. And we are less than 15 minutes from the end of this panel. As Vanessa Williams once said, maybe we save the best for last. All right, so Knight Rider. Let me bring this up here.
Knight Rider.
Take us away.
Again, a Knight Rider to me always had that Airwolf kind of thing where if you just look at it, it's unimpressive. It's just a black Pontiac Firebird Trans Am. It's it is what it is. But when you watch the show, it talks. It's a a rolling computer. The turbo boost. How can we forget? And I remember like kids when I was little, like just. It always came down to the turbo boost. That was always I'm going to jump something on my bike. Turbo boost. And again, it was kind of like it was his partner. It wasn't just a machine. It would get him out of jams. He had the remote control watch. He could talk to it. I mean, it was, to me, the Knight Rider is more concept than it is that vehicle. Mm-hmm. It's more the idea of that show. But it's a beautiful vehicle. I've sat in, a few of them, at different shows and things like that. Different conventions. It's very smooth, very clean.
Yeah. What do you guys think? John, take us away on your take as a technical, enthusiast. What do you think of Knight Rider?
Oh, I kind of look at Knight Rider through the lens of seeing it as a kid, and I loved it when I was a kid because of all of its sci-fi elements. Mm-hmm. Like it didn't have a steering wheel; it had a yoke like a 747 would have, and and in the back of my mind, I wondered if it really wasn't the spearhead of a Cylon invasion with those lights going.
Yep. What about you, Jody? I have to assume on some. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm definitely with Matt. I did love this show. I'm definitely with Matt. It's more the concept of kits, the self-driving car, the computer behind it, than the car itself. Although it's a nice car. For John, that's probably interesting for you as a gearhead and as a mechanic. Apparently, the cars used were so mechanically or too technical that for the shows they actually took out most of the electronics, like the computer, and simplified it to make it more mechanical for maintenance.
I loved this car growing up. I had the talking Knight Rider vehicle, which Jody and Melinda, I think, had a picture of. No, wait, there it is right here. Right here, the one on the right. And I also had the turbo booster on the left, in point of fact. I loved the car, but I think what I loved more than the car was the fact that it talked to you.
Yeah, it was a character in the show.
Yeah, I didn't realize it at the time, but even though is it a British accent that Kit talks with, or sort of it's not really. It's
I can't remember the actor's name now. It's Daniel, something Daniels.
Mr. Feeney.
He had been in Saint Elsewhere.
Saint Elsewhere, yeah,
right.
His name, but he just has a very erudite.
Yes, erudite. That's what it is. Yeah,
I just proper voice.
Yeah, I just loved that voice in the car. He's like, "Hello, Michael."
Hello, Michael.
Like I as a kid, it captivated me. I thought it was great.
He was like having that nerdy professor type sidekick that would always kind of keep you on point.
Right. Analog Toys, thank you for the super chat. He says, I pity the fool that doesn't love the A-Team van. I would agree.
For sure.
We talked about that a little earlier. Let's see. And Andrew Sabina just gave us a super chat. He says, if I can find it, it must be down here.
He said, my dad loves Trans.
Yeah, he says, my dad loves, it's funny, there it is.
There it is.
My dad loves Trans Ams, so growing up, Michael Knight and the Bandit were like demigods to me. I will love Knight Rider until my last breath. But I hope your last breath is far away.
Please don't die, Andrew.
All right.
They did kind of, in Knight Rider, they were kind of doing the paradigm of the Trans Am and its 18-wheeler friend a little bit. That, I mean, I'm just now remembering it, so it's kind of subtle, but but for Smokey and the Bandit, that might not have been a thing we kept coming back to.
That's a good point. Yeah, it would nest inside that. Like it would. That was where it would park, and then they would keep it driving around, and that was like their control center. Yeah.
And then they'd use that again in Spy Hunter, the game. That was a big deal in the game Spy Hunter. All right, John, where would you like to go next, sir? With 9 minutes to go.
Well, we haven't done the General Lee.
We haven't.
That's one of the more iconic 80s cars. As
Okay.
a kid, I loved to see that thing jump, but damn, they must have gone through a whole lot of chassis doing that.
They apparently by the last few seasons, they were hiring helicopters to fly over California neighborhoods and highways looking for 69 and 68 Chargers, and then going up to those people and offering them, cash on the barrelhead for them.
Insane amounts of money for them.
And they couldn't find enough of them, so they started using some model shots for some of the jumps at the end of the series.
You can only jump so many of those cars before they are trashed.
Right. And even the one that's famous for being in the opening sequence of, that jumps in front of the courthouse or whatever, that one was trashed on impact and thrown into a Georgia junkyard because they were filming in Georgia at the time. They filmed, the first 6 episodes or something, or 13 in Georgia, and then moved back to California to do the rest of the series. But I'll put it to you this way. I loved the Dukes of Hazzard show as a kid. It was one of the earliest things I watched, including the 60s Spider-Man TV show. And yeah, as much as I was kind of like barely out of being a toddler fascinated with that car, I don't consider it my first real obsession with a car because the DeLorean was just so captivating. I've never had the want to have a 69 Charger. And I think that's what separates the DeLorean from that for me.
I love 69 Chargers. I've never loved that car.
Right.
I don't like orange vehicles.
I loved it as a kid. I thought the car was really cool as a kid.
It was cool, but it was more cool what they did with it rather than what it was.
Right. John, what did you think of this car?
That came out fairly early in the 80s, so I was kind of a kid. I mean, obviously I liked fast cars, and if you jump them, that's a plus. But it didn't have the sci-fi aspects, and it didn't have the kind of foreign supercar aspects that even the 308 and Magnum P.I. had. So basically, the draw for me was that they kept jumping it. It was basically Hot Wheels every Monday night as a kid. Was it Monday?
I think you're right. It's hard to remember, but I think you're right. Jody, I'm really interested to hear your take on this.
For me, it was more what they did with the car, the car itself, the welded doors, how to get into the car, the sliding over the hood, the jumps, more jumps. That's what attracted me to the show. As an adult, I have more problems with the paint job. Hello.
Chris G says, thank you for the super chat. He says, just before the 80s was Corvette Summer, 2 social vehicles in the van and vet, Luke Skywalker in a Corvette, and Annie Potts custom van. Good point.
I love that movie. That is one of my favorite movies. It's got the van culture. It's got the vet. It was on constant rotation on HBO. So that movie's maybe in my top 10 or 15 for me.
Yeah, and they just put it out on Blu-ray a few months back, finally. And then Manta, he says, I'm not leaving without sending a proper super chat. Cheers to everyone here, and I hope you have a totally tubular day. Yeehaw.
Thank you.
All right, so we have time for one more pick, and I want to give that pick to Jody because Jody has done so much work to help get ready for this panel. I'm going to throw out the rules, and Jody, whatever vehicle, fictional, not even real, it can be animated, whatever vehicle you, sir, want to end on, we will end on it. So you want to end on the Buck Rogers Starfighter?
Yep, the Thunder Fighter.
All right,
for me,
take it away.
The most gorgeous design of a space fighter ever. I just love this vehicle. It's just so gorgeous. It's amazing. Actually, the design It was supposed to be a Viper in Battlestar Galactica until they chose a different design, and then thank God they used it for Buck Rogers. It's just such a beautiful fighter. It's so sleek, so elegant. I can ramble on about this forever.
Well, John, you as an expert in drawing starships, what are your thoughts on the Buck Rogers Starfighter?
It looks a little bit like a Joe Johnston design to me. I'm doing that just visually, and it seems like its pedigree might come a little from the speeders from Empire Strikes Back, but this being kind of an improvement on that. It's so gorgeous and sleek with the cockpit up in there. I wonder if it's maybe a kit pashed X-wing cockpit just on the front frames. But that's a good example of a good evolving starship design.
Isn't that a Ralph McQuarrie design? I don't know why that's sticking in my head. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's got lineage with the X-wing and Snowspeeder. So I love that design. I love how mean it looks. It looks like an animal bearing its teeth, like with tusks. Like, I mean, it's like it's just coming to like just bite a chunk out of you.
Right. I've always loved the design of this particular fighter. I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but I'm used to that on the internet. I'm going to say that I like this fighter more than the Battlestar Viper because it just looks like a big prodded nose in the air with just a few little wings on it.
Yeah.
I actually like the Buck Rogers one a little better. It is certainly one of those like the General Lee that even though it was in '79, its popularity was in the early '80s. Yeah. Its appeal has stood the test of time based on its secondhand collectible value and the fact that people are literally recreating the toy from the ground up just to have one.
We saw one of these last night in a collectible store here where Michael lives, and they wanted almost $300 for it, and it was missing lots of parts.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Stephen Shanks has a super chat. He says, "Hello, Michael. Are you sure you don't want to go for a pantsless drive?" And then
take your pants off.
And then Pete might have the last super chat of the day. He says, "Best looking car that came out in the '80s, Ferrari F40, hands down. Even if we could debate the Countach, the iconic design with a spoiler dates back to 1978."
I think that, yeah, it's when I think of a supercar, that's the first thing that comes up is that F40, but I'm definitely Team Countach. Just for it's less ostentatious looking. The F40 is impressive and it's cool looking, but it looks it's way too look at me, I guess, and that's the point of the design. But I don't know. It looks unattainable to me. I think a Countach would be like, yeah, I would put that in my garage and drive it.
Well, we are almost a minute away from the end. I want to thank John for being here because I know you're a very busy man. And
My pleasure.
I wanted to ask you, before I tell everybody where you all can be found and all that kind of stuff, I'd really like to give you the last word on why vehicles are important in fiction in our modern world, why they're important to have and what kind of impact they have.
I think it all goes back to storytelling and the vehicles kind of being an extension of the hero. In the vehicle, you had the personality of your main character. And one thing that the 80s kind of points out is that the more exotic and sleek and expensive the car, the more he was a rogue or corrupt. I mean, from it was your undercover corrupt criminal cops who were in Miami Vice who were driving the Ferraris. And if you go back to the 70s, your really upstanding cops, your Columbos, were driving the jalopies. So in a way, you could look at a guy's car and see that whether or not they were an outlaw.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank everybody for being here in the chat. This has been an amazing panel turnout, and thank you so much for the active comments. John is the artist behind the excellent comic book series. I just received my 2 issues. Thank you very much. Vector.
Okay.
You guys will know him as the artist behind the excellent Dark Horse Comics Rogue Squadron issues.
One of them.
Well, right. There were many artists on Rogue Squadron, of which you were one, sir. Which, guess what? That's one more than I was. Okay. And you can find a great interview that John graciously did with us here on RetroBlasting from just a few days ago, as a matter of fact, here on the RetroBlasting channel page on YouTube. I highly recommend you go watch that. It's my interview with John about his career. I'd like to thank Jody immensely for being here. He is the host of the YouTube channel GenX ToyGeek. And Jody, where else can they find you? I know they can find you on your GenX ToyGeek YouTube channel, but is there anywhere else that you can be hit up?
Yeah, you can find part of my insane Transformer collection on Chris Miwa's Chasing 80s Toys YouTube channel, because he did a feature on my collection. For the rest, you can find GenX ToyGeek on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Great. And also, before I forget, if you go watch that interview that I did with John, you will see links to where you can go get the new series Vector, which I highly recommend. I've already read the first 2 issues. They're awesome. John, great work.
Yeah, great story.
Yeah. And Matt, where can they find Reklaimer's Vintage Toys?
Reklaimer's Vintage Toys on Instagram. Reklaimers with a K. I am there almost exclusively, and I sell toys.
All right. Well, gentlemen, this has been awesome. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. And we will see you on the next video. There's something else coming up in, 30 minutes?
About 25 minutes, yeah.
Oh, it's the Trivia Showdown. So this is... all the proceeds for Trivia Showdown go to charity. This is the final championship for the Iconicon Trivia Showdown. All the winners from the various competitions are trophy. It's a trophy you can win. All the participants from the various competitions are going to be vying for the final top spot. So we'll see you in 30 minutes.
And I am competing in that, and I am the favorite because I've got thunder in my heart. Every move is like lightning.
You do look rad. You look rad,
and
man.
I'm pretty rad.
You look rad.
If you didn't get that reference.
All right, everybody. See you on the trivia challenge. Bye.
Bye.